Hey, good morning, everyone. It's Patrick Global Truth Bomb riffing on Monday, December 18th. My favorite day in the world is my son's birthday. Gonna have to get together with him in a little bit, but approximately 9 a.m. my time. And good morning. Maybe I should rename these Coffee with Patrick, but yeah, I'm gonna try to make this one short because, look, last night I get this, on my YouTube feed, for whatever reason, certain things pop up, right? It's part of my algorithm, things that I watch and everything else. And every once in a while, I tune into what is known as Anonymous. Anonymous used to be, going back to the Occupy Wall Street movement, a group of dudes who were like, we are Legion, we are Anonymous guys that were in the system, that were experts in tech and, secrecy and underground and could, blow up in secrets and all sorts of stuff. They were definitely against the machine. And years later, I guess we're looking at about 11 years later, they're not. I'm absolutely convinced that Anonymous is connected to what I think is the Steve Bannon sort of gateway, if you will, that I think is being funded by a lot of right wing white supremacist billionaires. I mean, there's no other way to really describe it. These guys are probably like in the vein or in the sort of space of the Mercers and the Kochs and these guys that we know that have been, funneling big time money to the Supreme Court. Harlan Crow, and then there's Leonard Leo, and there's a handful of others, but they're kind of point people. Those guys are point people for other big money that's in the space that reminds me a lot of what I would consider the early days of the John Birch Society, which were kind of this amalgamation of right-leaning millionaires that were kind of white supremacists, and they had big oil money, and this was back in the 50s and everything else. And these guys have been out there the whole time. And, the latest Anonymous trick, if you will, has been what they've been doing for like the last, 6 months. And it's been ridiculous. And this one was Tucker Carlson. And Tucker Carlson is the easiest to understand rudimentary 101 version of propaganda and what it's all about. Now, I wasn't a sort of like there's certain people in mainstream media that I would watch pretty obsessively, particularly somebody like Rachel Maddow, to kind of study what she was doing and what she knew and what she didn't know, and how she framed what her nightly routine was, and ultimately over the years what it revealed about mainstream or MSNBC's come from. And on the other side of that was Fox, and initially going back, a long time, Hannity was kind of like the main guy, but then of course, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, it became Tucker Carlson. And Tucker had a shtick. And I wasn't exactly sure what Tucker was doing. I mean, I'd catch every once in a while kind of what he was up to, but he didn't really fully get on my radar until I started hearing him do the postulating like that January 6th was something that it wasn't, because of all things, not Kevin Murphy, who was the Speaker of the House that just left. Kevin, it'll come back to me in a minute. But, they provided Fox and Tucker thousands and thousands of hours that they cherry picked and made it look like, that everybody that was there on January 6th was peacefully protesting. And the whole thing is just a sham beyond comprehension and just ridiculous. And that was the first time I really started to kind of think about where Tucker was going. And Tucker would make, these statements like, yeah, he was happy that, somebody from Antifa got smacked around and got, jumped or whatever. And I mean, he had these sort of like, these what do we call them? Dog whistles, right? For kind of white right-wing supremacy. And then you start to get into understanding that he comes from, Tyson Chicken. And by the way, if you're not aware of it, Tyson Chicken is the largest, I think, brand in that space, but they'd recently been fined something like $200 million for price gouging, and that would be part and parcel to why we had incredible inflation after all of this stuff with COVID, and then supply chains, and then inflation, and yada yada yada. Of course, that's Tucker Carlson's family. So Tucker Carlson comes from, and I've read some articles about him in the past where I think he grew up in San Diego. He's definitely part of probably the top 0.1%, I guess, his family, I would imagine. but he goes to Yale. I don't know if he's part of the Skull and Bones Society like the Bushes. I doubt it. I don't think I've come across that. But he's a smart guy. I've seen some things in the past where, he was he actually liked the Grateful Dead, kind of like like Ann Coulter. Ann Coulter was a fan of the Grateful Dead, and then these guys become these fucking dirtbags of noxious right-wing propaganda on a right-wing platform because that's what they got paid to do. And as we saw with the Dominion lawsuit that led to a settlement of $787 million, where Papa Murdoch, paid Dominion off for basically what he admitted, before it went to trial, that Fox's business model is a lie, and they were just giving the people what they want, and that's insane. That's insane that that's actually a possibility. But yeah, it not only is it a possibility. I mean, we've been observing it, and you can see it just as clear as day over now decades. But recently, it's just got last 4 or 5 years worse and worse and worse. And I gave Tucker some props on things that I thought was interesting over the years. Like I saw him do some stuff on private equity that I thought was actually close to the mark. And I always had fun with his UFO stuff, whatever. But Tucker got weirder and weirder and weirder, and then the Dominion lawsuit happened, and then he got spit out, and then he winds up as this independent guy, and then you start to see this collaboration. It was like right when he left Fox, we saw several things, right? We saw him pretty consistent with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and then we saw him, with Elon Musk. And there was this relationship that seemed to be forged. And then shortly thereafter, Elon goes independent. Who knows, how he's getting paid and what's behind him and his new shtick and everything else. But the platform and it is X without question. And but there's this other side of it that is anonymous, and they send out these like edited pieces of things that Tucker is commenting on. And I watched the most recent one last night that they did. And, and these things get hundreds of thousands of views, by the way, in some cases, millions of views. And Tucker was just prattling on about nonsense. And his shtick, his formula, his methodology is that, he initiates some sort of emotional pressure point that people respond to, whether it's, the elites behind, the curtains, manipulating everything that, the common man is being targeted and crushed by. And that's what he's fomenting to lead, I guess, a revolutionary sort of movement against that. And the vehicle is Donald Trump. And it's crystal clear for somebody like me, when you look through, who's been involved with this stuff going back to, at least in this case, 2016 with Donald Trump, and you understand the Russian troll bot farms, you understand the Mercers and Cambridge Analytica, and all of these things that have been going on for a long time that bleeds into, like I mentioned, about the right-wing supremacist billionaires that are paying all sorts of things behind the scenes. And I came across some information yesterday from a friend of mine because of another pitch that he's involved with, but I got to see a sequence of who's involved and the players that are involved and how they're doing it. And what I'm telling you from a producer's perspective is that everything that's happening in this space, particularly with Tucker, is so absolutely professionally executed, and they know exactly what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, which is just pure propaganda. And if I were to go deep dive on this and I were actually to investigate Tucker, I would not be surprised. My gut tells me that he is involved with all of the billionaire apparatus that I'd mentioned, who's also involved with Putin and Saudi. Now, why would that be? Why would it's hard to say that, right-wing, white supremacist billionaires who are part of this John Birch Society, let's call it 3.0 at this stage of the game in 2023, why would they be involved with something like, for example, Saudi and Putin? Well, because those guys are all about fossil fuel. And quite frankly, the war in Ukraine is about more territory. It's about, raw materials. It's about natural resources. It's about pipelines. It's about all of those things that provide Russia money, which also feeds Russia's war machine, which I saw on the front page of the New York Times this morning that Putin did an end round on all of the sort of methodology of the West boycott of any of his sort of business, sort of verticals, and he's winning. But this is part and parcel to that. And so, for example, there was this UFC fight on Saturday night where Tony Ferguson was fighting Paddington and Patty, and I'm not sure, what is Patty's last name? I think it's, let's take a quick look. It's Patty Pimblett. And it was a 3-round decision. It was a unanimous decision. But I remember seeing Ferguson walk in with his Make America Great hat. And, we've seen, Donald Trump and Tucker Carlson and Kid Rock and all of these guys, they're rolling into these UFC things. And it's all part and parcel to a propaganda deal. And it's all based on manipulation and techniques of marketing and who their audience is and what they're trying to cozy up to. And it was kind of interesting because Ferguson got beat. He's wearing his hat. It's not quite the moment of Jesse Owens, winning in 1933 or 32 Berlin in the Olympics kind of thing. But I thought that was kind of funny in a roundabout way. But, it's just part and parcel to the extension of what is, obviously this methodology of this very, very sophisticated execution of what is fomenting the next version of MAGA, which is most definitely fascism. Okay, it's absolute fascism. When you pull back everything that's happening with Trump, ultimately the 91 indictments, again, I've said this so many times in my truth bombs that Donald Trump is being indicted, the 91 indictments, but the sum total in terms of the way I'm interpreting this whole thing is that Donald Trump used racketeering to ultimately create this scheme where they used documentation fraud in the electoral scheme to steal the election using racketeering, of course. And on top of it, it was all deceptive acts and practices to defraud the United States using corrupt attorneys and, corrupt judges. Now, I think nobody would be surprised that, that's the thing, especially people that support MAGA. I think there's a lot of people, and I've interacted with a lot of these people. I think that like any other political sort of party, there's different variables of people that fit in that have different sorts of, let's say if we were going to measure it based on 1 to 10, a level of threshold of danger and why they're in it and what they're all about. You might have, for example, a small percentage of people that are actual Nazis and real fascists and, brown shirts and people that would create the kind of thing where they would go into stores and bust up windows and, put swastikas on storefronts and that sort of thing. I think that's a very tiny percentage of what MAGA is, personally. I think MAGA is mostly these right-wing, white conservative, white supremacist Christian, which many people call them Christian fascists, that want absolute control. So they want absolute control of the Supreme Court. Obviously, they want to get rid of abortion, which is really the only thing that seems to create any excitement from what we might call the blue wave, right? Because women definitely want to vote against that, and they have in midterms just recently and so forth. But it's also about deregulation, and it's also about making sure that the government can't hold billionaires to account. And then they, of course, want low taxes, and then they don't want to have any emissions. But ultimately, when you look at Tucker Carlson and Vivek Ramaswamy, these guys are anti-climate change, what they call propaganda. They do this twisting, pretzel logic where they tell a couple of truths about certain things like, oh yeah, the guys that go to Davos and fly around on, planes, private planes, and are billionaires, and guys like Steven Spielberg and all of these people that are all over the sort of ESG corporate sort of governance of, trying to get us to get weaned off of fossil fuels because of the problems that it creates for the world, that, these guys are just hypocrites and you can't listen to them, and they're coming to take your guns and they want to tell you what to do. Plus they fucking steal from you all day long. In fact, in this anonymous video, Tucker said, oh yeah, why would we want to hold Donald Trump accountable when they let their friends get away with this in a much bigger way? And I watched that and I'm like, they're right about that point. Because what I'm telling you is everything that I just laid out about what the government is pursuing Donald Trump upon, and hopefully we'll see him get indicted. He better get indicted before the election, because that's the whole reason he's running. Well, that and making sure that the world stays safe and free for fossil fuel domination, of which if Saudi and Russia can do a background to have their piece of the Federal Reserve, it's their central bank too, to be quite honest with you. And I'm not kidding. That's how this whole thing works, because that's what I've been continuing to try to inform you about, that you have this right-wing fascist movement that is basically treasonous, that uses as its point person a criminal who's been destroying everybody in his way since the 70s, his entire business model, and I'm talking about Donald Trump. You know, when he inherited nearly $1 billion, I guess he inherited about $600 million from Papa Fred Trump, who was obviously a KKK guy, and from what I understand was actually very part of, I think was even a part of the KKK rally at Madison Square Garden way back. And you know, so his roots in the KKK, you know, are like going back decades and decades. And that's been Donald Trump's shtick from the very beginning. But Donald Trump, when he inherited $600 to $800 million, and he gets into New York real estate, he's got to play ball with New York real estate in the 70s. It's owned by the 5 mob families of, you know, which were all of the mob, you know, bosses. And they were all involved with racketeering and monopoly and everything else. That was New York real estate, not to mention that you had to deal with backdoor incentives from state tax incentives and guys on the take in New York and everything else. And I'm talking about politicians. And that's how they got the business done. That's how you build, you know, these high rises in Manhattan and so on and so forth, where, as it turns out, many years later, we discover, yeah, it's a great money laundering epicenter for, you know, global oligarchs that are extracting wealth from people in their countries, most notably the Russians. And I'm talking about all the oligarchs that, you know, are under the umbrella of Putin. And how do we know that? Well, we know that Deutsche Bank, one of the largest banks in the world, you know, that's a German bank that's been around forever, you know, but they certainly had a big play on Wall Street, I think, going back to the late 70s. But, you know, they played ball on Wall Street's terms the way it's supposed to work. And, you know, they're all Americans and guys that come out of our schools that are their executives and so forth. And they became this laundering pipeline for Deutsche Bank into real estate in the United States. And oh yeah, by the way, as it turns out, Deutsche Bank is the only bank that was doing any business with Donald Trump. I mean, it's paint by the numbers. It's the easiest thing to see in the entire world. But you put that in context to this incredible, choreographed, vertical, and highly sophisticated, you know, funding mechanisms to create these scenarios that bleed into things that people like me like, UFC, to see Making America Great Again, and I'm glad to see him lose based on the hat and so on and so forth. But, you know, as a kind of a propaganda tool for Donald Trump, where people who like fighting, who might not know all of the details of, you know, geopolitics and the law and all of these different things, and who are working class, might be like, well, they've gotten screwed the whole time, and it's a great conduit to get them, you know, supercharged to, you know, have Trump be their guy. And meanwhile, Trump is selling everybody down the river. And so I'm like, and this isn't just for people that are MAGA, but I do consider MAGA the zombie apocalypse. I do consider people that get involved with MAGA, I mean, even though I know they're not all super dangerous, bad people, I know that a lot of these people are frustrated. They don't know which direction to go. So they get caught up in this thing, and they you know, it's a cultural thing. They see it in their church. They probably see it at Home Depot where they work, their third and fourth job, and everything else. And of course, the CEO of Home Depot is all in on Trump and that sort of thing. And, you know, meanwhile, they don't give a lick about the law and accountability and integrity and all of these other things about what does make America great. And they're like what Tucker said. Look, man, why would we hold Donald Trump accountable when they let their banker buddies get away with everything and they give their banker buddies free money? And this is a Steve Bannon antic, because Steve Bannon worked for Goldman Sachs. He knows how this whole thing works. I've seen it in interviews in the Fourth Turning and what happened to his dad and everything else. I know exactly where Steve Bannon's coming from, and I know exactly who Bannon works with. He works with the billionaires. And of course, Bannon got nailed for fraud for his fundraising for the wall that never existed, and he's a criminal in his own right. But it goes on and on and on. And it's just this like, you have a religious theocracy in Saudi Arabia that operates like the mob. You have Russia, which is the mob. And then you have the mob in the United States, and same with these white supremacists operate like the mob. So they're all real mob when we think about mafia. and grifters in business and all of those types of things. And they are fighting for control of the Iron Throne, which is the White House, which gives them the Iron Bank, which is the Federal Reserve. And oh yeah, the way they do it is through all of these different methodologies of manipulation through propaganda and paranoia and switching the blame. Like I say, the formula is lie, deny, switch the blame, and implicate. And that's exactly what they do. And Tucker is their point guy. But see, here's the dangerous thing about Tucker, and it got ultra ridiculous because of Elon Musk when he bought X. And X is a platform for this whole thing. And people say, oh yeah, Elon, the richest guy in the world, purchased this whole thing, and it's his, and he's going to like, basically bulldoze the left, and in his words, the Berkeley ultra liberal left that he couldn't stand, and he had to like create free speech. But this isn't free speech. This is all propaganda. And no, Elon didn't spend his own money to buy X. He ended up financing it, and who knows who's behind the scenes. I know that Saudi's involved. Who knows who else is behind the scenes, but I think it's all of these different actors that are all in congruency to create this platform of absolute propaganda. And oh yeah, by the way, Elon Musk is censoring me. So how do I know? Well, every day I study what my numbers are. You can look in the bottom right of your frequency of what your tweets are eliciting. And so, for example, like I might make some wise ass remark on somebody else's feed, and I literally have 30, 50, 100, 200 likes and tens of thousands of views. I drop truths on my page, and it's got nothing. It's got nothing. And I'm talking about which is now the $70 trillion truth of the ultimate mafiocracy, which is our financial system. That, of course, the battle right now is between the meritocratous, Wall Street Dems that have, Ivy League set that basically have created this mob, and yet, they can pretend like they're good guys. They've been, it's just insane. This goes back decades and decades and decades, and it's coming to a head. And the only people battling is this full-on right-wing MAGA universe. And I'm talking to you, and I've got, this crazy light in my eyes, and I can't concentrate. So pardon me for 1 second. I am going to lower the blinds because these truth bombs are just by the seat of my pants, stream of consciousness in the moment, and I'm a real guy. And so, I got to deal with this sort of production value as opposed to actually doing what would look like Tucker Carlson level production, and which is what I'd actually ultimately like to do. But what I'm bringing you are things that are monumentally bigger than anything Tucker Carlson ever delivers, because Tucker Carlson is part of the whole scheme. And that's how he's getting paid, okay? And I hate Tucker Carlson. And I'll elicit this challenge again and again and again. Joe Rogan, if you're ever watching this, I want to fight Tucker Carlson in the octagon. Me, mano a mano. Me and Tucker Carlson. Let's hype it up. Let's talk about, going into it, what I represent, what I'm bringing, what I'm talking about, and what he's all about. And then I want to fight him in the ring. I want to fight Tucker Carlson like there's no tomorrow. God, would I love to fight him. Same with Elon Musk. Same with Vivek Ramaswamy. I'd fight them all at the same time, to be honest with you. But Vivek Ramaswamy, for example, and this is how bad this has gotten, right? So think about this. I was thinking about laying this out as well. So I already mentioned that Papa Murdoch got nailed with $787 million for, basically defamation. Even though he settled, it didn't go to court and it didn't go to trial and it didn't come with a conviction. But yeah, he agreed to pay off Dominion for all the lies that his network elicited vis-a-vis the Dominion voting boosts in the 2020 election. Okay, so there's that. On Friday, Rudolph Giuliani, the guy who was the ultimate prosecutor in Manhattan, everybody's favorite mayor, who was a national sensation right after 9/11, who fought the mob back in the 70s and who was the actual kingpin of RICO, the racketeering statutes that is racketeering influenced corrupt organizations, and he was taking on the 5 mob families as a total hero, kind of like the Battle of Gotham. It was like a Batman sort of movie, if you will. And that guy ends up going to the dark side, becoming Count Vampire Giuliani, and all of the weird melting metamorphosis that he's done because he's a drunk and married 3 times, and the guy's life is a shit show and practically broke. he ends up getting, the jury brings down, the settlement, or excuse me, he's got to pay $148 million to two African American women that he defamed because of what's going on, with the 2020 election, right? Okay, so think about that in context to Elon Musk. Now, I see lies every day, all day, from all of these entities that I'm telling you, and now add Alex Jones to the mix. And of course, Vivek Ramaswamy. The other day, Vivek Ramaswamy posts and he says Elizabeth Warren is worth $70 million because she's corrupt. Okay, if Elizabeth Warren's worth $70 million, Houston, we got a problem. Because Elizabeth Warren has been really the point person for the Democrats, along with Bernie Sanders, for the last 13 years, basically attacking all of Wall Street corruption and the special investigations and everything else. But I've always found her to be just lip service. She plays on the corrupt's terms, and she's never been a real threat. And I think it's more like, the way this whole big picture works is that on the Democratic side, who's owned by the Wall Street meritocracy, it's the revolving door of the big money players. It's like, okay, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders can be critical and they can act, to a certain contingent of America, but they'll never be a threat because they won't give you the information that I'm giving you. Okay? And nor can they take it on. And so, for example, when Vivek Ramaswamy says on X, on this public platform, where I think they got, last time I saw it was definitely like 78,000 views. I mean, this is significant viewership that now believes that Elizabeth Warren is worth $70 million. And if Elizabeth Warren is worth $70 million, there needs to be a congressional investigation as to how and why. And if Vivek is right and she is that corrupt, man, I'm telling you, that's the final shoe to drop. I mean, would I think it's plausible? Not really. I don't think she'd be that stupid. But at the same time, it's like we've seen the stuff that happened with Pelosi, and yet her husband was in real estate, so that's a whole nother thing. But then the worst part of it is a woman by the name of Kelly Loeffler. I mean, all of Congress is insider trading, but Kelly Loeffler from Georgia, the senator, is married to the former president of the New York Stock Exchange, and they bought from MERS and turned it into ICE, which is a big piece of the securitization of the housing industry on a global scale. That is what I need to bring slightly to your attention, and this is going to be the first of many things going downstream. That's all plugged into this matrix of all of the corrupt players. So Elizabeth Warren doesn't respond to Vivek Ramaswamy at all, and I guess she's playing the same card. Like, let's go back to Barack Obama, Michelle Obama. When they go low, we go high. Oh God, really, kind of like like Oprah, right? Yeah, she's above it, right? She's above the fray because she's a billionaireess. Meanwhile, who knows what she's involved with? And I think she's involved with a lot, especially at the Wall Street level, at the high level, which makes them, kind of, so removed from all of the other crimes that I'm revealing to you. It's like, yeah, it's almost like their shit doesn't stink, right? So Barack Obama gets accused by this guy, Larry Sinclair, on Tucker Carlson's show about 2 months ago, where this guy claims he was doing crack and having, homo sex with Barack Obama before the 2020 or before the 2008 election. And he makes all of these claims and neither one of them present any evidence. Okay, so I just want you to imagine the level of defamation and libel, and against whom. So Barack Obama has the ability to bring the wood if he so chose. And I would say Elizabeth Warren even more so, considering she's still a senator. If she wanted to do an investigation into what is going on X, but they haven't yet. And so the question is, okay, so we just saw this $148 million judgment against Rudolph Giuliani for defamation and libel against these two women, but they're not Elon Musk because he's the richest guy in the world who's probably backed by Saudi and these right-wing billionaires, and they probably got armies and armies of attorneys. And there's this other thing like Section 230 or whatever that's like, you can't sue the guy who's the owner of X because of what other people say. So it's a free speech platform. But then what they're doing is they're choking free speech. They're choking guys like me who've got the now $70 trillion truth. That's who Patrick Lovell is. Through all of the things I lay out in all of my truth bombs day in and day out, not to mention what I've done in my work, The Con, at www.thecon.tv, and my other podcast, The New Untouchables, which lays out all of the evidence of the $70 trillion truth that the $90 billion a year apparatus of government couldn't actually bring to your attention because they're too busy taking down Trump, but they're not taking down Trump. It's fucking nuts. All of this stuff is absolutely nuts. And yeah, for those of you who are trying to like compare dick size, put it into context. Elon Musk is worth $250 billion a day. I mean, given the fluctuations in the market, let's say he's worth $250 billion, which puts him as by far the richest guy in the world. Now, of course, he doubled his wealth during COVID. Wow, boy, that's interesting. How might that happen? Well, because of everything I'm telling you, because what I'm telling you that nobody else in the world is telling you, and my come from, is liberty and justice for all, the integrity of law, and that the USS supercarrier United States has to function the way it's designed, which is the way it was written in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and everything that's come since in our wars through the Revolution, the Civil War, civil rights, war against fascism, and then all of our great, achievements. Okay, that's where Patrick Lovell is coming from. I am a true patriot. So I'm trying to make America great forever, okay? Let's make America great forever, which we can. And how would we do that? Well, I'll tell you, is there a better way to spend $70 trillion? And I was going to say, if you're going to compare dicks, there's 1,000 billion and a trillion, and I've got the $70 trillion truth. So what am I in comparison to Elon Musk? If only you could hear me, because what they're doing is they're sabotaging me because they're propping up the propaganda artists that are creating this fascist revolution that's a criminal syndicate that's backstopping, they're in play with our enemies. Okay, and oh yeah, the war in the Middle East is a big part of it, and the bottom line is with the war in the Middle East, meaning Israel and Gaza and Hamas and all the rest of it, looked different if Saudi wasn't the swing producer and oil meant the future of the world. I mean, guys, we've got the technology to recuperate, to rebuild. What I'm fostering through the Clean New Deal, which is our plan, that's got to get through to your thick skull, and you need to share me. You need to study me. You need to get other people involved so that they understand I've got the fucking evidence and the facts that can turn this thing upside down and inside out. You got to think of it as a presidential campaign, but it's not a presidential campaign. It's a populist tidal wave crusade to purge corruption and drown the fascism fuels and reboot America. How? Well, you've got to be able to, A, have a vision. The vision is we got to reconfigure, reboot the golden goose. We've got to recreate manufacturing. Is there a need for new manufacturing? Yeah, all things renewable, which is exactly what Vivek Ramaswamy and Tucker Carlson are all against, because they're like, yeah, it's against the Davos guys, the BlackRock, this and that. But yet, you know what? Let's not worry about us being involved with Saudi and Russia. And let's not be, they're going against climate science that's been around for 4 decades. And we've seen increasing temperatures and the evidence and the facts and the consequences and the nonstop, environmental crises that have come from this entire thing. And they're like, nothing to see here. Just like they said, there's nothing to see in the January 6th insurrection. Like, yeah, it was a peaceful demonstration. I mean, my God, they're lying straight to your face in every which direction, and they manipulate in a way to basically steal for themselves, for these power operators, through these lies to create, chaos in society, and you can't see the forest for the trees. But what they're battling is because they know what I know. Steve Bannon knows exactly what I know. And oh yeah, they're going to basically bring down significant anti-Semitism when it serves them, because it's easy from this perspective, which I've done millions. I've done several truth bombs about anti-Semitism from my perspective, being a Jewish guy, that is telling you that, yeah, indeed, there were a lot of Jewish guys involved with creating this chaos that we're involved with that got away with murder, quite frankly. But I continue to also say they didn't do it because they were Jewish. They did it because they're assholes. And there was a lot of people in the scheme that weren't Jews, by the way. It was an equal opportunity grift. And then ultimately, there was a lot of really good guys, myself included, that were trying to take him down. So there's that. So anti-Semitism needs to just disappear from the conversation. And quite frankly, Islamicism, you got to call a spade for what it is and everything else. And I've already done my truth bomb on Gaza and everything else. So if you want to see what my position is on that, Just check it out. It was like my last truth bomb, which I think I dropped last Friday or whatever. But look, what does this have to do with the Clean New Deal that I have got to get your attention and I've got to get millions of you involved with? We've got to recreate, let's call it the industrial Midwest, which was the Rust Belt, which is something that we could turn back on to recreate our auto industry, to recreate the manufacturing, everything that we need to do to rebuild the grid, everything that we need to do to rebuild our infrastructure by way of all of the different renewables, and that would create gazillions and gazillions of jobs. We've got to reanimate the middle class of this country that this neoliberal experiment over the course of 5 decades have completely killed, thrown the baby out with the bathwater. They've killed the golden goose. That's what this is all about. This is a 5 decades long march to prove that you can't have a society that's out of whack, that's an imbalance because you're not producing what you're consuming. The trick that we did, and the United States is brilliant at this, at least these guys at the highest levels. Like you hear all the time the Republicans say, we're a constitutional republic. What they're telling you is that means we're basically leadership of the minority because of all the tricks that they can play. And that's what it is with the Electoral College and gerrymandering and all of these other things with dark money. That's what they want the the United States to actually work for. So the full faith and credit of the United States is going to these exploitative, shall we say, Confederate, barons that are just sucking money upward. Okay, so the robber barons are doing the exact same thing on a different scale, on a global scale, and blah, blah, blah. But the full faith and credit of the United States, which we got because we won World War II. And because we became a superpower, because we were an industrial superpower before, because we had an incredible economic engine, we had a consumer society, so we could create that and we rebuilt the world and we became this amazing superpower. And yeah, we were in a titanic struggle with communism and the Cold War and everything else, but the Politburo of communists were basically no different than any other sort of ism. I mean, it was just like when you put the power and the control in the hands of the few, and you basically destroy the dynamism of a country, you destroy its capacity. And what I am fervently trying to impress upon you is that when you understand the fraud, when you understand the con, when you understand how the system is doing what it does, which is all laid out in the blueprint of what our series reveals, the con, then you can understand what the grift is and who does what, when, and how, and towards what end, and that's what the law is supposed to do. Consider the con discovery. And the media is supposed to deliver this to you, but the media never did because the media is paid by the same situation. So the Clean New Deal is not only going to recreate a rising tide raises all ships for a burgeoning, dynamic, upwardly mobile middle class through fairness and also all of these new things that have to happen because we're like, I'd say 20 years past what should have happened naturally based on market functions if they actually weren't monopolies and that our government wasn't bought. And oh yeah, 9/11 fits into that, which is a whole nother situation. But it's just Oz. You've got to see the forest for the trees. You all know the system is rigged and corrupt. And so what we have to do with the Clean New Deal is we also have to bring the ultimate, it's not the investigation because I've done the investigation, indictments, and then we have to have a literal prosecution of the financial system that's walked with $70 trillion since 2009. Guys, it's out of control. It's getting worse and worse by the day. The power's getting more and more constricted. There's more and more people that are on the fray. You know it yourself, even if you do, like UFC and you go to your 3 jobs and you're barely hanging on and you're gambling and you're doing this and that and you can't keep your family together and it's the holidays and all of these pressure-filled situations. Everything is predicated upon what we're talking about. And so what we're going to do with the Clean New Deal is we're going to create accountability for the system that betrayed us. And boy, am I going to, there's nothing more in the world than I want than the big payback. Now, a lot of you might misinterpret me as saying this dude, Patrick Lovell, is literally a violent threat to the system. And, eventually somebody's going to throw me in jail for that or kill me or whatever the case. Yeah, maybe that'll happen. I'm not preaching violence. I'm trying to use the last vestibles of what we have left of our democracy and what we have left of our actual legal system. But I have to get tens of millions of you on the same page so they can't lie to us anymore. And by they, I mean both sides of the fence. It's the Tucker, Russia, Trump, Saudi, white supremacist, right wing billionaire apparatus that wants absolute control of our democracy, which isn't a democracy. It's an oligarchy, or it's some sort of aristocracy. That's what they want, man. That's what the Confederacy has always been. That's what plantation capitalism has always been about. And democracy is not that. Democracy and free markets and the rule of law is that great people with great ideas and great tenacity and great spirit who can find answers to solutions that we need then make money on the way up, and so does everybody that's a part of it. That's the notion of capitalism, if you ask me. And what is capitalism? Capitalism is money, right? But the way we all interpret it, especially many of you on the left interpret capitalism, is this exploitative, mafiocracy. Okay, well, we just have to rename capitalism to something else, and then we have to just impress upon everybody that we have no law, which means we're not a democracy. It's not that complicated at all. It's just you have to see the engine for how it is and what it works. And these things matter. And if you're a patriot, and I got to figure that there's literally 1 out of 100 of you. And if you're dynamic and you're smart and you're somebody who, is big into software, if you're big into algorithms, if you're big into how the system works, if you're big and you want to fight against the power, join me. We've got to come together because we the people don't have skin in the game. Guys, this is really the last chance that we have before it's gone, before it's going to take another 2 or 3 generations for people to have to live under the thumb of tyranny, for people to finally fight back. I don't want to wait 200, 300 years. I'm not going to be around to see it, nor do I want to go down the tubes with the impending disaster. I want to destroy these guys that are destroying us, and that's justice, and it's for we the people. So rise, roar, revolt, onwards and upwards. Failure is not an option. When you have the truth, you're bulletproof. It's not rocket science, it's racketeering. Failure is not an option. Try, please, to donate $13. Come on board if you can. And if you can't, spread what we've got going on. Let's break through these algorithms. Let's get the truth out there by any means necessary. And if you can donate $13 or invest $13 is the way I'd rather look at it, then please do at your earliest possible convenience. At the end, what we're going to do with this whole thing is we're going to build a vertical to get the truth out every which way to Sunday, to battle the billionaires that are all doing the stuff that I've laid out in this whole thing. But we've got to take this on the road. We've got to take this on a tour where I can show the millions of people exactly what's going on, and we got to do it in a barnstorming Lollapalooza-like tour that goes all throughout the country and then winds up in Washington, D.C. under President Abraham Lincoln's gaze, where we prove our generation's commitment to a nation of, by, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. And this is the last thing I wanted to say. MAGAs are socialists, okay? Surprise. They don't know it, but they're socialists. So how many of you out there are either in construction, or you work at Home Depot, or you're flipping houses, or you're in real estate, or you're a broker, or you're a lender, or you're this, you're that? It's a big part of our society, okay? And a lot of those people are MAGAs. They support Donald Trump because, A, it's a grift. There's so much lying going on in that industry. It's insane. It's even worse than it was what I showed you in 2008. I'm getting information every day that because of what we didn't get right in 2008, and because we provided $33 trillion in 2009 to the actual apparatus of racketeering, which is our financial system, and then we kicked in another $16 trillion in quantitative easing, which means that we purchased all of the so-called toxic assets that this industry created, got them off the books, and all of these trillions of dollars kept going into it. Did they fix the system? Did we fix the system? No, it got worse and worse and worse. And ultimately, what we're seeing now, for example, there are developments all over Texas. Texas didn't get hit in 2008. It's about to get walloped now, where there is so much bullshit where these developers have built these giant fucking neighborhoods and they don't have them sold. The occupancy is so high. I mean, excuse me, not the occupancy rate. The supply is so high and the demand so low but the prices are still so high. Why? Because these guys are the ultimate grift. They package through the developers and the investors all of these huge developments, and same with commercial real estate, and then they sell to the government through quantitative easing, who are buying the bonds for top dollar. That was the actual buyer, was the Federal Reserve. That's our government for this inside pool situation. So everybody working in that situation, especially those of you who are working your ass off in 3 jobs and you're getting paid penance and all of the rest of it, the guys that are making all the money are the dudes who are the higher ups. And then all of the sales processes are all a lie. And so it's another giant bubble of stuff that's about to blow up. I don't know when it's going to blow up. If it blows up before the 2024 election, given all of the mayhem that we're in the midst of right now, hold on to your butts, as they say. Guys, there's no time to lose. We've got the answers. We know how to fix this. We know who's doing what, when, and how. We've got to bring down the wood on these guys, and we've got to transition us to new economy. And no, it's not socialism doing it the way I want to. It's reconfiguring a free market, if you want to know the truth, through the development of integrity of the law. But you've got to hold the bad guys to account. You can't have monopolies, because once you have monopolies, you have corruption. And at the end, corruption births and fuels fascism. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. If you have any questions at all, please PM me. Please send me a message. Please share, subscribe, like. We've got to get this message out before it's too late. All the best.